Did you ever wake up thinking your life was finally getting back on track, only to have it completely ripped apart before you even finish your first cup of coffee? That's exactly what happened to me. One email, 7 lines. And just like that, 23 years of dedication vanished like smoke in the wind. My name's Greg, and what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a lesson in how the quiet guy in the back office, the one who never made noise, ended up being the biggest threat to a corrupt empire. Before we dive in, if you believe in justice, in standing up for what's right, and in seeing people who abuse their power finally get what they deserve, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. It really helps the channel grow, and I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Okay, now let me take you back to the beginning of the end. It was my first day back from medical leave. I'd been gone for 3 weeks. Doctor's orders, after a minor surgery that turned into more complications than expected. Nothing life-threatening, just something that made me grateful for modern medicine and short walks in the morning. I logged into my personal laptop around 7:30 a.m., brewed my usual dark roast and checked my inbox. That's when I saw it. Subject line: Notice of termination, effective immediately. No call, no warning, no meeting. Just a PDF attachment with cold legalese, signed by someone I'd never even met in person. I hadn't even had a chance to turn in my doctor's note. Now let's pause for a second. Imagine giving your entire adult life to a company, sacrificing weekends, vacations, even your health, to make sure every dollar added up. And the moment you become inconvenient, they delete you like an old file on a cluttered desktop. I was numb, but that numbness didn't last long, because underneath it was something else, a quiet rage, the kind that doesn't explode but simmers, the kind that watches, waits, and when the time is right, strikes. And oh, I would strike, but not with fists, with facts, with files, with every little digital breadcrumb they thought I'd never trace. Because the moment they pushed me out, they made one big mistake. They underestimated the man who built the system. At first I thought it had to be a mistake, maybe some system error, a miscommunication. I mean, who gets fired by email on the morning they return from medical leave? But the more I stared at that PDF, the more it sank in. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. There was no warning, no performance review, no red flags, nothing. I went to log into my work email. Access denied. Tried to VPN into the system, blocked. My badge didn't even beep at the front door, and then it hit me like a punch to the gut. They'd wiped me out overnight, like I'd never existed. But I had existed. I was the backbone of that department. Not the face of it, not the talker in meetings, but the guy who knew where the numbers lived, and what they meant when they started acting strange. And lately, they had been acting strange. See, just a week before I went on leave, I noticed something that didn't sit right. I was logging audit entries late at night, something I always did before month-end close, and I spotted a few anomalies. Restricted access logs. Activity under my own credentials, but during hours I wasn't online. Files being opened, sensitive vendor reports, internal review docs, and then closed without any recorded edits. That's when I knew. Someone was in the system under my name. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I've learned over the years, when you see smoke, don't yell fire. Collect evidence. So I did. I quietly backed up logs, exported reports, printed off metadata sheets. I didn't know exactly what they were up to, but I had a gut feeling I'd need this. Turns out that was the smartest thing I could have done, because while I was out recovering, someone was busy digging a hole they planned to bury me in. They just didn't count on me showing up with a flashlight and a map of the entire graveyard. And the deeper I dug, the more things started to stink. And I mean rot in the core of the fridge kind of stink. There was one name that kept showing up, like a watermark in the background of every questionable change. Logan Reeves, the new CFO. Young, sharp suit, startup attitude. He came from a failed tech venture in Austin and walked into our grocery chain like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs, minus the vision, and plus a serious God complex. And then, of course, there was Chase, Logan's 24-year-old nephew. No experience, no accounting background, but suddenly holding a senior financial advisor title. While I was being pushed out, he was being pulled in. And believe me, I was not the only one who saw it coming. They say when a ship's about to sink, the rats start running. But in my case, they were doing the opposite. They were crawling in, gnawing at the foundation from the inside out. I'd been working long enough to know when a storm is coming. The temperature in the office had changed. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Passwords got stricter. Certain files suddenly became need to know. And apparently I didn't need to know anymore. But the funny thing is, when people think you're done, they get sloppy, overconfident. And that's exactly when I started seeing their blueprint for betrayal. I wasn't going to wait to be blindsided. I started building my defense quietly, methodically, just like I'd built every audit report, every cash flow projection, every internal compliance file for over 2 decades. First, I used an old trick: print everything that matters. You'd be amazed how often people forget that metadata doesn't lie. I ran system logs, access histories, audit trails, all showing entries under my credentials at times when I was provably elsewhere. Then I cross-referenced vendor transactions, ones that had suddenly shifted to manual review status. Several vendors that had consistent histories were now getting massive overpayments. Others, not being paid at all. All of it started during my leave. I wasn't paranoid. I was precise. Like a surgeon before a major operation, I knew one wrong move and I'd bleed out legally. So I encrypted everything, saved it to a secure drive, and stored a backup off-site. Not just because I'm cautious, but because deep down I already knew they were going to come for me. But they weren't just trying to discredit me. No, they were setting me up. By the time I got that cold email of termination, I realized they had crafted the perfect corporate crime: frame the loyal veteran as the fall guy, cover up the internal theft, and let the new blood claim they were cleaning house. But I had a trump card, one they didn't know I held. Back in 2017, after a close brush with a federal audit, I'd negotiated a contract update with then CEO Nancy Delaney. It was rare, nearly unheard of in our company, but she trusted me. The clause stated, if I were ever terminated without documented misconduct, I was entitled to 18 months severance, reviewed by a third-party auditor. And you better believe I had a signed copy of that contract, both in hard copy and scanned on the same secure drive. They were about to learn the hard way. You don't bury the man who keeps the receipts. For the first few days after the email, I didn't leave the house. Not out of shame, but out of calculation. I was letting the silence settle, letting the panic rise on their end while I studied every document, every log, every number like a man preparing for trial. And then, 3 days later, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Greg, it's Bennett Cole. I hadn't heard that name in over a year. Bennett was the last CFO before the new regime. Old school, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who knew that numbers don't lie, people do. He'd been one of my few true mentors, a guy who never raised his voice but somehow always had your full attention. He taught me how to spot patterns, not just in spreadsheets, but in people. I heard what happened, he said. His voice was calm, but I could hear the tension under it. They're not just trying to replace you. They're using you. That's when the floor dropped out beneath me. Bennett told me he'd been watching from a distance ever since Logan Reeves came on board. Said the guy had a reputation, big ideas, flashy presentations, but no discipline, and a trail of creative accounting back in Austin. They're cooking the books, he said, and they needed someone with credibility to pin it on. Someone who had access. Someone they could discredit. It all clicked. That's why Chase had suddenly been promoted. That's why my systems were being bypassed. That's why my name was removed without a single question or meeting. They were cleaning house, yes, but only to hide the dirt. Then Bennett said something that made my pulse stop. I've got contacts at Hartwell Foods, he said. They're competitors, sure, but they're clean. They've been looking for someone like you. It felt surreal, like watching someone open a door you didn't even know existed. 1 minute I was discarded like a broken part, and the next I had a potential lifeline. Bennett didn't just offer advice, he gave me options. And more importantly, he gave me back something I hadn't felt in days: leverage. This wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about reclaiming my name, my career, my dignity. They thought I'd disappear quietly. But what they didn't realize is that when you cut down a tree with deep roots, you better make sure it doesn't fall on you. And I was about to fall hard and loud right on top of them. After the call with Bennett, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope exactly, something sharper, a sense of purpose. I wasn't going to sit in my living room replaying old emails and wondering why. I already knew why. Now I needed to decide what I was going to do about it. That's when I reached out to Jordan Clay, my lawyer. Not the kind of guy who chases headlines or posts flashy billboards. Jordan's the guy you call when you don't want a war, but if there's going to be one, you want him in the trenches with you. We met the next morning. I handed him a folder so thick it could stop a bullet, copies of contracts, system logs, financial reports, timestamps, everything. He flipped through the documents like a surgeon reviewing scans before a major operation. His face didn't change much, but I saw it in his eyes. He knew this was big. Then he got to the contract, the one from 2017, the clause about severance. He smiled, not a wide grin, just the corner of his mouth pulling up like he'd found a hidden door in a locked room. "You know," he said, "if they terminated you without documented misconduct, they owe you 1.5 years of salary." I nodded. "And if they fight it?" He didn't even blink. "Then we file with the Missouri Securities Division. We go public. We blow this whole thing wide open." Suddenly I had something they didn't expect, a legal framework backed by evidence and ready to expose every lie they'd tried to bury. But that wasn't all. A day later, I got a call from Hartwell Foods. Bennett had spoken to someone high up and they wanted to meet. Not a formality, a real interview. I drove to St. Louis that Friday and walked into their headquarters. Nervous, sure, but also burning with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Confidence. And here's the kicker. They already knew what had happened. Word gets around in finance, especially when you've been pushed out for asking too many right questions. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Logan had targeted. Hartwell had picked up 2 other ex-Summit employees. People I trusted. People who knew how I worked. That meeting didn't feel like an interview. It felt like a reunion and a beginning. When they offered me a director-level position in financial compliance, it was more than a job. It was vindication. A second chance handed to me by the very industry that tried to crush me. And just like that, I had 2 things Summit Market Co. never expected me to walk away with: a lawyer who doesn't bluff and a better offer on the table. They tried to erase me. Now I was about to become the reason the whole story unraveled. It didn't take long for the ripples to start spreading. Just a week after I accepted the offer from Hartwell, my lawyer Jordan walked straight into the legal office at Summit Market Co. He didn't sneak around. No backdoor meetings. He went through the front, briefcase in hand, documents in tow, and confidence radiating off him like heat from a summer sidewalk. He laid the contract on their table. 18 months of severance, enforceable by third-party audit. He showed them the logs, the ones that proved someone had used my credentials while I was on leave. He showed them the files, highlighted and time-stamped, tracing access manipulation, unauthorized vendor adjustments, and internal audit inconsistencies. And then he dropped the final card. "You're welcome to fight," he said, "but if you do, we're prepared to file with the Missouri Securities Division." That wasn't a threat. It was a fact. And trust me, they knew exactly what that meant. Because once the Securities Division gets involved, it's no longer just an internal matter. It becomes a matter of public trust, investor transparency, and potential criminal liability. That's the kind of spotlight corporate executives hate more than anything. For the first time, they weren't in control. I was. And just like that, the company that tried to erase me suddenly had to pretend they'd never done anything wrong. Emails started circulating internally at Summit. I didn't see them personally, but I had people on the inside. People who were still hanging on, quietly rooting for me. People who'd been afraid to speak up, but now they saw a crack in the armor. Amy, the HR assistant who handed me that envelope. She messaged me through a personal channel. "I didn't agree with it," she wrote. "None of us did. They said you were under investigation, but no one ever saw a report. It felt wrong from the start. Wrong wasn't the word. It was engineered. A surgical strike on my career. But they forgot one thing. You can fire a man, but you can't fire the truth. And the truth was leaking. Whispers in the finance department. Vendors asking about discrepancies. Chase, the CFO's nephew, suddenly absent from meetings. And Logan? He was now the one avoiding eye contact in the halls. They tried to replace me with silence, but what they got instead was an echo, one that grew louder with every passing day. And I wasn't done yet. Because now it wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about burning down the whole lie they built on top of it. There's something poetic about watching a house of cards collapse, especially when you were the one they tried to bury underneath it. 2 weeks after Jordan delivered the documentation to Summit's legal team, things started moving faster than I ever expected. It began with a vendor. A small produce supplier based out of Joplin contacted a mutual connection at Hartwell. Their invoices had been paid double, twice. But then the second payment vanished from their records. Just like that, no explanation, no correction. That was the first crack. Then came a freight company. Same story. Paid too much, refunded less, paperwork altered. One by one, the stories started piling up like bricks in a wall they couldn't keep standing. And then, boom. The Missouri Securities Division opened an inquiry. Not a full-blown raid, not yet, but a formal request for internal records. That's all it takes. Because when regulators start knocking, even quietly, panic starts echoing down every hallway in the company. I heard it from a former co-worker. Chase Reeves, the golden boy, was suddenly on leave. No emails, no updates, just gone. And Logan? Well, Logan stopped showing up to board meetings. He claimed he was traveling for investor relations. Translation, he was ducking accountability like a man running from his own shadow. The best part, they still didn't know how deep my evidence went. See, while they were trying to keep up appearances, I had copies of internal emails, ones I'd archived before they revoked my access. Emails showing Chase being given override permissions on vendor payouts. Emails showing Logan instructing staff to route sensitive data through a parallel review system. It was all so slick, so confident, like they thought no one would ever question it. But when you move millions around like it's monopoly money, eventually someone notices when the board flips. Hartwell's legal team offered to help coordinate with investigators. They didn't want Summit's scandal to splash onto them, especially now that I was under their roof. And more importantly, they saw value in doing the right thing. That was new for me. After years of corporate silence, I was finally surrounded by people who wanted the truth to win. And the beauty of truth is, it doesn't need to shout, it just waits. And when the lies fall apart, it's the only thing still standing. Summit Market Co. tried to make me disappear. Now I was the reason the state was breathing down their necks, and we were just getting started. If you've ever been wronged deeply, you know there's a moment, a shift, when anger cools and something colder takes its place. It's not revenge. It's not even satisfaction. It's clarity. That's what I felt watching Summit Market Co. try to hold itself together with duct tape and damage control memos. They issued internal statements, called it a review of vendor protocols, claimed they were proactively addressing concerns. But I knew the truth. I'd lived it, and so had others. That's when it started happening. Ex-employees started coming out of the woodwork. Quiet emails, anonymous messages. People who'd been dismissed, overlooked, intimidated, just like me. One had been a compliance officer, demoted after flagging unusual transactions. Another was in IT. He'd been pressured to delete log data, but had quietly made backups before being let go. Each new voice was another brick in the case against them. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. No tweets, no interviews, no dramatic press releases, just silence and evidence. Because the beauty of a well-documented lie is that it unravels on its own once the right people start pulling the threads. By now, the Missouri Securities Division wasn't just requesting documents. They were interviewing people, asking questions, cross-referencing stories. And every step of the way, Logan Reeves got more isolated. The board started pulling back. Directors who once praised his vision began distancing themselves. Investors stopped answering his calls. And behind closed doors, there were whispers of resignation. Then came the first leak to the media. A small business blog in Springfield published a piece titled, "Trouble at the Top, Summit Market Co. Faces Financial Scrutiny." It wasn't a bombshell, but it was a spark, one that lit a fire under everything. Customers started asking questions. Suppliers got nervous, shareholders furious, and me, I just watched. From my office at Hartwell, I sat at my desk, looked out the window, and took a deep breath. Not because it was over, but because they knew it had begun. They tried to destroy my name, my career, my reputation. Now their brand was bleeding in the news cycle, and the man they tried to frame was the one feeding the truth, one file at a time, to the right people. And I hadn't even testified yet. Up until that point, I'd been the ghost behind the curtain, the silent name no one could mention without the room getting quiet. But that changed the day I got the call from the state investigator assigned to the case. "We've reviewed your materials," she said. "We'd like to speak with you in person." No hesitation, no stalling. "Name the time," I replied. I knew what this meant. Once you're in the room with investigators, everything you say becomes part of the record. You can't half tell the truth. You either stand by your words or they'll bury you under them. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The meeting took place in a modest government building. No suits, no cameras, just a plain room with a pitcher of water, a few notepads, and 3 very focused professionals on the other side of the table. They started with questions, timelines, access logs, contract clauses. I gave them everything. But what really made the air shift in that room was what came next. I handed them a portable drive, encrypted, time-stamped, clean. Inside were records showing exactly when vendor payments were overridden, which accounts received the rerouted funds, and who authorized the actions behind the scenes. It wasn't theory anymore. It was proof. One of the investigators paused after going through the index file. She looked up at me and said, "How long have you been collecting this?" I shrugged. Long enough to know I'd need it. That was the moment everything changed. From that point forward, I wasn't just another wronged employee. I was a key witness in a financial misconduct case that could redefine corporate accountability in the region. And the best part, everything I gave them was clean. No hacking, no gray areas. Just digital breadcrumbs they left behind while thinking no one was watching. And they weren't just watching now, they were following the trail. A week later, subpoenas started flying. Logan Reeves received one. Chase, still on leave, was called in for questioning. HR staff, finance team members, even vendors who'd unknowingly been part of the scam. Everyone was now part of the story they tried to bury with a 7-line email. I didn't have to say a word publicly. I didn't have to shout or accuse anyone online. All I did was show up, with facts, with files, with the kind of patience you only develop after 20 years of watching numbers never lie. And now, the numbers were speaking, loud, clear, and with consequences. You can tell a lot about people by how they act when the lights come on. In darkness, they whisper, manipulate, plot. But the moment those lights flip and the walls start closing in, the cowards run first, and that's exactly what happened at Summit Market Co. The moment subpoenas hit, executives started resigning. Not all at once, no, that would have been too obvious. But in waves, quiet and coordinated. The chief legal officer retired early. The head of vendor relations left to pursue other opportunities. And the senior director of finance, gone overnight. No farewell email, no LinkedIn update, just gone. It was like watching the tip of a glacier suddenly crack and split, revealing all the rot underneath. I didn't even have to dig anymore, they were unraveling themselves. One of my former teammates, still inside, sent me a message I'll never forget. "They're in full lockdown mode," she said. "Internal servers are being mirrored. Phones confiscated. IT says they've never seen this kind of scramble before." And at the center of the chaos, Logan Reeves. His once proud swagger had evaporated. The guy who used to strut into meetings with big ideas and bigger ego was now doing everything he could to avoid being seen. No more company-wide emails, no more innovation initiatives, just silence and fear. But the moment that really told me we'd won wasn't an email or a headline. It was a settlement offer. They didn't say it out loud, of course. It came through legal, disguised in neutral language, dressed up like a mutual resolution, but I saw it for what it was. A white flag. They wanted me to disappear. They were willing to pay, generously, if I just agreed not to speak, not to sue, not to testify any further. And for a moment, I considered it. 18 months of severance, plus damages. That kind of payout doesn't come often. But then I remembered something. The email they sent me. 7 lines. No call, no respect, no dignity. They didn't just fire me, they tried to erase me, so I declined. Respectfully, professionally, and permanently, Because sometimes justice isn't just about what you gain, it's about what you refuse to accept. And I wasn't going to let them write the ending. That was mine. By now the story had grown beyond me. What started as a quiet betrayal between office walls was now a headline circulating through Springfield, across Missouri, and even into national trade forums. Summit Market Co., under investigation for financial misreporting. CFO linked to vendor fraud scheme. My name wasn't mentioned directly, not yet, but those who knew, they knew. I started getting messages from strangers, employees, ex-vendors, even customers. One woman wrote, "My brother worked there in logistics. They cut him loose last year for no reason. Said he didn't meet quotas. He's been blaming himself ever since. Now we know the truth." Another message came from a college kid. "I interned at Summit last summer. I thought something felt off, but who was I to say anything? Thank you for standing up." And it hit me then. This wasn't just about my severance, my career, or my revenge. This was about truth echoing through the silence they had forced on so many. When people are scared, they don't speak. But when someone finally does, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for, it gives others permission to do the same. That's what was happening. Former employees started coming forward to regulators. Vendors compiled their own discrepancies. Even junior-level accountants, once terrified of being blacklisted, began offering testimony. The investigation gained momentum. What was once a concern became a case, and all I had to do was not disappear. I went to work at Hartwell every day with my head high. Not because I'd won, but because I refused to lose on their terms. They thought I was just a number cruncher, just the guy in the back office with a spreadsheet. But what they didn't realize is that numbers are the most honest thing in the world. They don't care about power, they don't care about titles. They only reflect what's real, and what was real was damning. Logan hadn't just cut corners. He'd built an entire empire on paper-thin lies, propped up by nepotism, fear, and the hope that no one would ever look too closely. But I looked. And now, the echo of that truth was louder than all their lies combined. You ever watch someone bluff so hard they forget the cards were never in their favor? That was Logan Reeves. He walked into Summit like a man with a plan, the big visionary, the disruptor, the man with tech world instincts and next-gen ideas. But the truth, he was just a con artist in a tailored suit, propped up by ego, nepotism, and a boardroom too afraid to question him. Until now. Because when the subpoenas landed, when the interviews started stacking, when regulators began knocking on doors with search warrants instead of request letters, the board turned on him, hard. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard about it from someone who was. It was a Thursday, emergency meeting, no press, no public statements. Just the top brass, gathered around a polished table that had seen too many bad decisions and too few good ones. Logan was presented with everything, emails, overrides, payouts, the full forensic timeline. And the best part, they didn't even need my voice anymore. The evidence spoke louder than any testimony. When they asked him if he had anything to say, he reportedly leaned back, looked around the room and said, "You were all fine with it, until you weren't." That was his defense. Not innocence, not denial, just bitterness, just deflection. Just the truth finally catching up to him and burning everything in its path. He resigned that day, not with dignity, not with grace. He left the building through a side door, escorted, not thanked. No farewell emails, no press release, just silence. But the real ending, that came when the Missouri Securities Division confirmed criminal investigation proceedings were moving forward. Vendor fraud, financial misreporting, internal manipulation, potential wire fraud, all of it under Logan's oversight. And Chase, his golden nephew? His position was dissolved, credentials revoked. He's now under review, possibly facing charges of knowingly participating in fraudulent activity. Their little empire, built on deception and arrogance, collapsed like a sandcastle hit by a tidal wave, and all I did was tell the truth. One file, one email, one timestamp at a time. They tried to erase me with a PDF and silence, but I buried them with proof. And now the man who thought he could rewrite the rules? He's finally learning that real accountability doesn't come with a severance package. You'd think I'd be jumping for joy. The guy who tried to destroy me was now facing criminal charges. His empire, ashes. His reputation, a cautionary tale. And yeah, there was satisfaction. But the emotion that surprised me most wasn't triumph. It was peace. I didn't realize how heavy that weight had been until it was gone. The weight of suspicion, of injustice, of being treated like a disposable cog in a machine I helped build. Now, at Hartwell Foods, I walk into work and people greet me by name. Not because they fear me, but because they respect me. My office? It's not flashy. No skyline view, no private espresso bar. But every time I sit at my desk, I feel something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. And the irony, I never chased power. I never wanted a spotlight. I was just the guy who made sure the numbers were honest. But when you stay true to the numbers, they stay true to you. Hartwell gave me more than a job. They gave me a platform to build something better. Now, I lead a team of compliance officers, not just to catch errors, but to build a culture where integrity isn't optional. And let me tell you something, when your name goes from being a risk to being a reference, that's a feeling no promotion can match. I've reconnected with old colleagues, mentored some younger ones, and the best part, some of the people who were pushed out of Summit alongside me, they found their way here too. We built something out of the wreckage, something honest, something real. Sometimes I think back to that morning. 7:42 a.m. One email, 7 lines. It could have ended me. But instead, it woke something up inside me that had been quiet for far too long. Because when people try to write you off, don't let them write your ending. Let them write their lies. And then? Tell the truth so loud their lies can't breathe. I never set out to be a symbol. I didn't want attention. I didn't want revenge fantasies or viral stories. I just wanted fairness, clarity, the kind of basic human respect that so many people in power forget they owe. But somehow, by simply refusing to back down, I became a voice for others who couldn't speak. At first it was emails and quiet thank yous. Then came invites, to speak at ethics panels, to consult on internal audit systems, to advise startups on how to build things the right way from the ground up. It still feels strange sometimes, people calling me courageous, telling me my story gave them the strength to leave toxic jobs, to file their own complaints, to stop blaming themselves for the corruption around them. But maybe that's how real change happens. Not with speeches, not with marches, but with one person quietly choosing not to disappear. It made me realize something. Silence isn't always submission. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's survival. And when the moment is right, silence turns into the loudest kind of truth. I think about the younger version of me, the guy who stayed late every night to clean up someone else's mess, who thought that loyalty was its own reward. And I wish I could look him in the eye and say, "You were never just a number guy. You were the spine of that place. And when they tried to break you, they only proved how strong you really were. Because when the storm passes and the liars fall silent, what's left standing is the truth you never stopped believing in." Summit Market Co. is now a name people speak with caution, not pride. Logan Reeves, a case study in executive failure. And me, I'm just Greg, still drinking my dark roast, still checking the numbers. But now, I do it with my head up and my back straight. And every so often I get an email from someone who starts with, "I don't know if you'll read this, but..." And I always do. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone isn't advice, it's proof that you survived. And I did, not in spite of what they did to me, but because I never let it define me. There's a kind of silence that hurts, when you're ignored, overlooked, dismissed. And then there's the kind that heals, the silence after justice has been served, the silence when the storm is over, and all that's left are the pieces of what once was. That's the silence I live in now. No courtroom drama, no final showdown, just quiet mornings, honest work, and a name that I protected when no one else would. Summit never issued a public apology. Of course not. That would require integrity. But they did pay. Quietly, heavily. And they lost more than money. They lost trust. They lost good people. They lost the illusion that no one would ever challenge them. And me. I didn't need them to say sorry. I just needed them to stop pretending they won. Because the truth is, I did. Not with rage, not with rumors, but with records, with patience, with the kind of strength that doesn't shout. It endures. People still ask me, if you could go back, would you do anything differently? And honestly, no. Because every moment of doubt, every second of pain, every long night staring at that email, it led me here, to peace, to purpose, to proof that you can lose everything, status, security, even your job, and still walk away with your soul intact. They thought I'd break, but they never understood who I was. I was the man who traced every penny, and in the end, I followed the truth, all the way to theirs.